All right, I think we can get started. Small group at the moment, but people can roll in as they're available. So yeah, welcome to the Octane Community Stand-Up for July. It's weird to say that it's for July because it's just July 1st today. Today we're going to go through the standard agenda, talk about the releases. I'm going to do a demonstration of some of the features in the most recent release, talk about roadmap, talk about marketplace, events, and some time for discussion. Um, yeah, so today is actually Canada Day. And I'm a Canadian, so I obviously took this picture from Canada's big win in the first round of the Elimination World Cup. Um, I think Canada's already overachieved in this tournament because it's actually never even had a tie or a win before. So, um, anyways, happy Canada Day. So, release updates. So 10.2.1 was the most recent release of Octane, and that was on June 19th. That release had 22 pull requests, 49 commits. That was done by myself and Lee Pointer. Some of the highlights of that release were that it was again focused on sort of optimizing some of the scale out capabilities that were added in 10.2. The main I guess, focus was on when running in a scaled out environment in production. There were some concurrency items that might materialize. So, for example, there was a task, there was a workload that would run during startup, and it was originally implemented so that it would only run on the first request to the site, and it was using a lock to prevent other threads from accessing that code during that first request. It made sense to actually move that logic from sort of the first request to the startup because obviously startup already has this capability so that it only runs once per machine. So that was with that, I was able to eliminate the lock. And so actually Octane has no locks in it at all now. Um, and there were some other optimizations that were done as well for concurrency reasons. For example, including like a random delay during application startup so that you don't get that scenario called thundering herd where everything starts up simultaneously. A similar technique was also added to the scheduled jobs because every I-hosted service starts up simultaneously as well. And so it's actually useful to have a little bit of a delay between them so that they don't all actually execute at exactly the same time. And so a lot of these things sort of came to the surface after running in a scale out environment. A few other minor features that were added in 10.2.1. So the user profile component, which you would include in your themes. It's basically the component that shows the username up in the top right side of the screen. And when you click on it, it allows you to get to your user profile. It now has a parameter so that you can specify whether or not you want to display the username, the display name, or the user's email address. So a few different options that didn't exist before. Before it was uh, only possible to display the username. An enhancement was made to the external login capability. So this is when you're integrating with, a third-party login like Entra or something of that nature. The the third-party identity provider has the ability to pass claims to the Octane system. Some standard claims are email address and name, in addition to, of course, ID. ID is the most important one. Um, but in the cases where claims are passed that have an email or a display name, the system will automatically now synchronize the values with the Octane system. This is generally because when you have an integration such as this, your user account details are often maintained externally. So if someone, changes their email address in the remote system, then they would probably like that email change to be reflected automatically in the Oqtane system as well. And so that capability has been added. Adding some missing unique indexes to the master database tables. I am not sure why they were not added from the very beginning. Tables such as tenant, for example, the tenant name is intended to be unique across the entire installation. Similarly, scheduled jobs, the scheduled job type is supposed to be unique. Aliases, are unique within a tenant. So there's a variety of unique sort of columns, so to speak, and they didn't have unique indexes on them. So it was actually possible for duplicate data to get inserted into the database under some scenarios. And actually, this came to the surface as a result of the scale out optimizations as well. Because if you have sort of two systems starting up at the same time, there might be a race condition where they're both, trying to register a new job, for example, and it would actually allow two jobs with the same type to be registered in the master database. And so having a unique index prevents that from happening. 10.2.1 also updated to the latest .NET SDK, which was 10.0.9. And so that deals with any, security issues that might have existed in older .NET SDKs. There was also some other third-party components that were updated in 10.2.1. For example, there was a compatibility or a security vulnerability issue in SQLite. And so there was a newer version of SQLite that was included in 10.2.1. And I think that was it for those types of updates. And so obviously 10.2, the whole theme of the release was on scale out. And I've shown this diagram a number of times, but the general sort of scale out architecture that was focused on for Oqtane was a model where you have a shared location where the application is installed, and then you have multiple web instances which point to that shared location. And so in this model, for example, if you use like the file upload capability, those files that you upload, regardless of the web instance, are going to be stored in that shared storage area. They're going to be registered in the shared database, and so they're available to every instance. So this was, and then also when it comes to maintaining your Oqtane installation, you only have to upgrade the application in one place. And then all web instances, of course, get the benefit of that upgrade at exactly the same time. So there's some benefits of using this approach, and this is why it was chosen as the scale out model for Oqtane. And with that, I'm going to do a bit of a demo to show you a few things. So locally, I have IIS running. I have a couple of app pools that I've created, one for like one instance of Oqtane and one for the other. I've created a couple of sites. Each site uses, of course, those different app pools. If we go into the basic settings, we can see that the physical path for this site is pointing at websites Oqtane. And if we look at the basic settings for this site, it's pointing at the exact same location. So this is an implementation, essentially, of that diagram that I just showed you, right? Where you have a couple of web instances and they're pointed at the same physical location on my local system here. All right, so that's IIS. Now, because I'm using the scale out capability of Oqtane, I'm going to run Garnet. So I've explained what Garnet is previously. It's a Redis compatible server that you can run locally on Windows. So I just have a command line argument so that I can run it. So it's now a service that's running on my system and will be listening on a specific port number for any messages that are sent out over the Redis system. I'm also going to fire up my my Redis kind of viewer here so that we can take a look at what kind of cache items are created. And so I have, this is my local environment here. All right. And with that, I'm going to actually fire up a couple of instances here. So I have site1.localhost, which is one of the IIS Oqtane sites that I showed you. And so I have that instance running, and then I'm going to run on site 2, right? So I have these bindings set up for the 2 different Oqtane sites. But physically, they're pointed at the same location, but they're running in their own isolated app pool, right? And so if we're logged into this instance here, and so if I go to my system, no, not that area. If I go to my system info area and I go to my options, I can see that the cache is set up here to use scale out and distributed caching. The connection string is just pointing at localhost 6379. This is my Garnet server. And then I have this extra parameter that's set. And so my environment is set up to use scale out. So now if we go back into the Redis Insights and I drill into the environment, we're going to be able to see that we have cache items here. So for example, the list of aliases for these installations is cached in this cache key. The list of tenants is also cached. I can drill down into a specific site, so site number 1, and I can see that there's HTML text module instances that are cached, permissions that are cached, user information that is cached. So you can see all of the different cache items that are that have been created in my environment. All right, so if we go back to my instance here. So this is my site 1 instance. And let's say I want to go into here. I'm going to change the name of this page on this instance and save. So what I would expect is immediately the other instance needs to be aware that I changed the value of a cached item, right? So the list of pages in the site are cached. And so if I go over here now, it still says home 2, but as soon as I navigate to a different page, it changes. Because it was automatically aware using the scale out capability and the cache synchronization that value changed. And if we go in and we take a look at maybe the event log for that, and we can see that there was an update. And so you'll notice here, so in my IIS configuration, so if we go into IIS again, if I choose the server and I go into the configuration editor and I go into, I have to choose, app pools is chosen. How do I get to the area that I want to go? Oh, collection. So there's two app pools in my collection. Click here, come in here. These are my 2 app pools. I can select one of these, go down to my environment variables. I can see that I created a website underscore instance underscore ID environment variable called site1 for this app pool. Similarly, I did it for the other one. And so that environment variable with that name is the same as what Microsoft Azure uses as well to identify a specific site or web instance right within your environment. And so this is how I was able to simulate it using my local IIS environment as well. And so as a result of that, if we go in, we can see that this event happened on site 1, right? And so it's all on the same server, the Silicon server, but it was on this particular instance, right, where the event happened. And so that kind of log, that stuff's integrated into the event log. It's integrated into the job log as well. For example, if we go into the scheduled jobs area, let's look at maybe the purge job. And I do not, oh, because it's already run today. So yeah, it never recorded the information because it's not expected to run again until tomorrow. I guess I can't really demonstrate. Oh, this one, let's do search index job. Okay, so search index job runs every minute. And we can see here that the job ran on one site and then on a different site. And then so it's not always going to run on the same site. And you can, well, got a problem there. Anyways, okay, so that kind of shows you how in a scale out environment, right, the cache can synchronize cache entries between the two different sites, and you can basically scale out to as many instances as you want by using the kind of this technique. So that's pretty powerful new capability that Oqtane has. All right, so I'm going to shift back over now to the slides. Right. So talking a little bit about Marketplace for a moment. I know in the last meeting, I think Lee asked about if when there was going to be some improvements made to the Marketplace. I had talked about making improvements for quite a while now. But anyways, after the 10.2.1 release came out, I was able to get back to focusing on the Marketplace improvements that I wanted to make. As a reminder, I guess, some of the challenges of the Marketplace as it exists currently. So the marketplace, when it was originally created a couple of years ago, was conceived as an app store. And what I mean by an app store is, yes, there's like a service that's running that's sort of a central registry for all of the different packages and products that are available. But the idea was that you would access that through your Oqtane instance that you're running, right? Your installation. So your installation would make a call to the App Store. It would get a list of the different products that are available. They would be displayed within the Oqtane application. If you wanted to download something, you would say download from within your Oqtane application. If you wanted to purchase something, you would click purchase. It would take you to a checkout process that exists on the App Store, but then you would navigate back to your original Oqtane instance to actually download the product. So that's what I mean by an App Store. It was treating much like, like the Apple App Store, right? It was treating your Oqtane installation as if it were sort of a device, right, that needed to access apps from a remote store. Sometime after the marketplace was launched, the marketplace website was sort of added, meaning it had a home page where it displayed the list of the products. But it was not intended, I guess, at that time to be like a storefront, right? Where you would like navigate to the marketplace directly, you would purchase products directly. Over time, obviously, there was some feedback that people wanted that kind of capability, so additional features were added. However, the problem was that the marketplace itself was never architected for that kind of a use case, right? It was always intended to be an app store from the beginning, and the reason why I'm saying that is because the marketplace has a very, or at least in its current form, has a very significant dependency on something called the app installation ID. Every Oqtane installation has a unique installation ID. And sort of that's how the interactions between your Oqtane instance and the marketplace are managed, is through that installation ID. And that means that when you, for example, wanted to purchase a product and you were navigated to the checkout process, there was never a requirement that you needed to log in with a user account that existed on the marketplace, right? Behind the scenes, it transferred the installation ID along with the request. You sort of never saw it. You made the purchase. And then when you navigated back to your Oqtane application instance, it would be able to determine that you made a purchase because it had the installation ID kind of wiring the whole thing together. So that worked as long as you used the system as it was originally conceived as an app store. If you instead navigated directly to the marketplace, like going to www.octane.net and viewed the list of products there and decided that you wanted to purchase something, when you got to the checkout page, you didn't have an installation ID. So on that form, it would actually force you to enter an installation ID. And that was confusing for people because they're like, what is an installation ID? Where do I find this installation ID? In some cases, people would take the wrong, they would take the, because there's also a GUID that's related to a specific site in your Octane installation. And that is not the installation ID, right? That's a site ID. But people would, put that in and then make the purchase. And it would, of course, allow them, because there's no validation, it would allow them to make the purchase, but then later they wouldn't be able to download the product and they would wonder why. Well, and that's because the installation ID wasn't wired up correctly. So, anyways, there was, usability issues for the marketplace website because of that. Another problem was that if you purchased a product on the marketplace, and then you later went back to the marketplace, there was not an easy way for you to kind of log in and see all the list of purchases that you had made previously. That was because there was never a requirement for you to log in the first place. So there was no user account to tie things back to. So anyways, there are some people that would prefer sort of the more legacy, traditional marketplace experience, right? Where they go to a marketplace, they view products and they purchase. Um, I guess in that case, they don't care about the integration so much. They're probably going to they want to download the package from the marketplace and then upload it into their Octane installation manually instead of having that seamless kind of integration that exists currently. And so one of the other problems with the current model was that the license activation for commercial products happened at the time of purchase. So, if somebody, say, purchased a product, it would generate the license with an expiry date at that exact point in time. And then let's say maybe they waited like 2 or 3 weeks before they actually um, decided to download that module into their Octane instance. Well, they don't get the benefit of like the extra time it took for them to activate the license. The license was activated at the time of purchase. There was also no ability to have enterprise licenses, meaning like every licensed product, commercial product, was tied to a specific installation ID. And so let's say you had an environment where maybe you had a production installation of Octane and a test installation and maybe a development installation. And all of those, when you installed them, of course, had unique installation IDs. Um, in theory, when you purchase a product, you probably should be able to use that purchase in any of those environments that you own. But the current licensing system wouldn't really allow that unless you kind of synchronized your installation ID across all of the different Octane instances that you were managing, which isn't really intuitive or that convenient. And so um, that was a problem. And then Octane has also like supported the ability to have trial downloads. And the way that that trial download concept was implemented in the marketplace was inconsistent with like the other types of licenses that existed for commercial products. And so that created some challenges more on a sort of tech debt side of things where it required additional logic because there was multiple paths that the code needed to follow depending on whether it was a trial license or a regular license. So a bunch of enhancements have been made, but this is obviously going to change the functionality around the marketplace, meaning the new expectation when a user wants to purchase a product from the marketplace means that they need to have a user account. So that means they're going to have to register an account on the marketplace. They're going to have to log in to the marketplace in order to complete the purchase flow. As a result of this, however, the purchase flow no longer requires an installation ID at all. So it's basically tied to your user account. And that means later, if you go back to the marketplace, you log in with your user account, you'll be able to see the full list of purchases that you've made in the past. License activation has been decoupled from the purchase flow. So when you purchase a product, a license isn't generated automatically. The license is generated at the time that you activate the product in an installation. Also, I guess the notion of an enterprise kind of license exists now, where when you purchase a product, that product can be activated in multiple Oqtane installations. Um, a unique license key will be generated for each installation, but the number of like instances is dependent upon the purchase, not on an individual installation. So that makes it easier to activate licenses across different um, installations that you may have. Trials are now standard product license, so they follow kind of the same flow internally within the marketplace as any other type of a license. And then overall, the marketplace itself was upgraded to .NET 10, and I also converted it from being using the older kind of module-based, like Oqtane module approach, to using the newer Oqtane application approach, because that makes a lot more sense for this type of an application, because it is an application. It is not something that would be packaged up and shared with other folks for installation into their own installs, right? So makes much more sense for it to be an Oqtane application. Um, this slide I created like a couple of years ago when I did a presentation around the marketplace itself, and it talks about some of the different flows that exist within the marketplace. So there's, the open source flow, meaning you're in your Oqtane installation, you're presented with a list of open source products that are available. You click download, and it basically downloads the product directly from the marketplace. In this particular flow, you don't need a user account, right? You don't need to have a user account registered on the marketplace because this is not a commercial product. A trial is a free version of a commercial product that allows you to download it and experiment with it before you decide to purchase, a version of a real commercial license. So the trial flow is, you download the product, you install it, you use it, and it still requires an activation with the licensing. So even a trial product download requires a valid license with an expiry date. And so there still is an interaction between the Oqtane licensing mechanism and your local installation. Um, then you have the freemium model, where you might have a commercial version that has a price of $0. In that scenario, you are navigated from the Oqtane installation to the marketplace to a checkout page, which, where you'll see that the price is $0. You will have to log in, of course, under the new model, like with your user account. You can complete the checkout process. It will create an actual order for you that is $0. And then when you go back to your Oqtane installation, you'll be able to download that product and then activate a license for it. So freemium and trial are slightly different in that, they're both sort of essentially free to use initially, but the freemium model actually requires you to do a proper checkout. And then you have the full normal paid commercial module where you have to check out. And in this case, you're going to be navigated from the marketplace checkout page to Stripe, where you'll actually, do the actual purchase. Stripe sends a webhook request back to the marketplace to indicate whether or not the purchase was successful. It'll create an order for you in the marketplace if it was successful. And then when you're back in your Oqtane installation, it'll know whether or not you've purchased a product, and it'll allow you to download it. And then once it's downloaded and installed, then you can activate the license. So 4 different consumer flows for obtaining products from the marketplace. Each of them have, slight differences. The one thing I'm going to show you about this, which is going to be obviously a difference, is the so I'm going to run an instance of the App Store locally. Um, we're not going to really need to take a look at that, but okay, we're up and running there, so I can minimize that, and then we're going to run. Oops, then we're going to run Octane itself. And I'm going to show you some enhancements that were made recently. These are not checked in yet. So if I go into system info, this was the installation ID that was previously, required for interacting with the marketplace, right? This is the installation ID for your installation. Um, it is not like, going to be required anymore for interacting with the marketplace. Um, so if I go into module management, for example, and I go into install module, right? This is now interacting with the marketplace. You'll notice now that there is a marketplace tab. So if I go to the marketplace tab, in this case, it says that my installation is successfully connected to the marketplace. The way that happens is, normally this would say www.octane.net, right? For obviously my local testing purposes, I've changed the URL so that I can actually do proper testing locally. But normally it would point at the actual official marketplace URL. I would enter the email and password for my account that exists in the marketplace. And when I hit save, it's going to authenticate me against the marketplace, and it's going to save a token, right, a security token in my Oqtane installation, which will be used when I want to, if I choose, say, a commercial module and I say buy now, it's going to um, pass a this security token along with the request, right, to the marketplace. Well, sorry, it doesn't need to pass it, but so when it needs to retrieve the list of products that I may have purchased previously, it uses that token to send it to the marketplace. And in that way, it knows who the user is, right? And it can get the list of things that they've purchased. And so that's been implemented in module management. It's also been implemented in theme management as well, right? Because in both cases, you have the ability. Um, and so it's just, rather than burying that feature in system info, I've actually made it just part of the marketplace kind of UI itself. Um, and so that would be how you would connect your Octane installation to the marketplace going forward. It wouldn't be based on that installation ID that I showed you previously. And so as a result of that, if I shift back to slides, um, so in order to implement these changes, right, it requires changes to multiple independent components, right? It requires changes to the Octane framework, which is what I just showed you, right? Where you have to specify your email and password, and it's going to retrieve a token for you. It needs that token. Without that token, it's not going to be able to interact with the marketplace and figure out which products that a user has purchased previously, right? So that's a requirement. It needs changes to the licensing component. The licensing component also needs to kind of be aware of of this token, right, that's stored in the installation, and pass along that information to the marketplace when it makes a request to get a license from the marketplace. And then there's the marketplace like website service itself that requires changes. So there's three independent components that all require changes. So the big question then is like how to support older Octane installations and modules that are using, I say older here, but the current licensing component, right? Um, because this is a fairly major change, right? Architecturally, we're going from relying on installation IDs for everything to relying on sort of like a user account, right? That exists in the marketplace. And so it's Going to be a bit challenging, is all I can say, because depending on the scenario that you're running with, right? You might be using an older Octane installation, but with a module that's been upgraded to the new licensing component, or you might be using a new Octane installation with a module that's using the old licensing component. So there's like all these different variations that need to be handled. And the problem is that depending on the scenario, there may be a key piece of information that is missing, right, from that flow. Because the new flow is dependent upon this user account. The old flow is dependent on installation ID. The system can try to make its best effort to try and, make the right connections, but it's not always going to be possible. So requiring an upgrade of all these different components is obviously the one sort of best case scenario, perfect model. That's not always going to be possible. The other thing I'm contemplating is maybe in the marketplace itself, there needs to be a place that once a user has registered, they might be able to register some specific installation IDs that they manage, because that would provide sort of the key linkage between their user account and installation IDs that would then allow the system to associate, right, an installation to their user account, and then with that, they'd be able to associate it to a specific purchase that they've made. Because there is a gap right now if you don't know what the installation ID is for a particular user account. So I still have to explore this a bit more to try and figure out if there's any other way around this. Um, but anyways, I guess it's safe to say this is a fairly major breaking change when it comes to the marketplace, and it's, necessary in order to get the new functionality, right? The new um, capabilities that I described here. They're basically this breaking change is going to be required with the marketplace in order to make this work. But it's not going to exactly be the most simple, seamless upgrade. Um, there's going to be some scenarios which are going to be a little bit cumbersome to deal with when it comes to the marketplace. This is like, I would say, a shorter term problem because eventually, all well, I would assume the majority of Octane installations will be upgraded to newer versions which support that user account integration directly. And over time, the third-party modules will also be using the new licensing component. So then this problem will eventually go away, but in the shorter term, there's going to be a bit of a pain point. Anyway, this is just something to be aware of because a lot of, I think, people have asked for certain enhancements, but haven't thought about like what the implications of that are from a technical perspective and what the breaking changes might be. Um, the breaking, I've tried to describe now what those breaking changes are. And like I said, there is no like sort of perfect solution to this, but it'll be a necessary issue to kind of work through. All right, so as far as roadmap is concerned, um, I've mentioned the fact that as part of the scale out capability, the folder provider concept was not required, but it is a feature that is quite useful when it comes to scaling out your Octane installation, right? If you want to store your user kind of contributed files in a separate location that's outside of the web instance itself. Um, so Ben Zhang did submit a pull request a couple of months ago that contains an implementation for this. It's quite a large pull request. It's going to need some review and testing, but I do believe that it is a very valuable feature that needs to be included in the core framework. And so I do plan on including it. As far as releases go, I think that there will be a maintenance release, a 10.2.2, that happens this month in July. And then after that, the folder providers will be integrated. That pull request will be integrated. It might require, some refactoring, some testing, but then that will be the major feature that's part of 10.3 that will happen probably sometime in August. So that's kind of just giving you some insight into the roadmap over the next couple of months in terms of like what the feature or what the expectations are for features. Events, we hosted the 2026 Trailblazer Conference in June, on June 17th. For those who didn't have a chance to see the sessions live, the recordings are going to be published once they're finished going through post-production, which probably will be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think personally that it was the best Trailblazer event that we've ever had. It's just a very exciting time to be in technology because there was so many interesting topics that were featured in the Trailblazer, and it was interesting how they sort of all kind of flowed together. Certainly, there was like a large emphasis on Blazor. There was a large emphasis on AI, but all of the different sessions kind of really fit together really well. So, really incredible content, and I was really grateful that we had 5 speakers from Microsoft this year covering a very diverse set of technology. Like we had Daniel Roth covering Blazor, David Ortno covering .NET MAUI. Adam Ratzman actually covered Aspire, but it was interesting because he demonstrated or talked about how Aspire is using Blazor to power the dashboard that is shipped as part of the Aspire product from Microsoft. So that was interesting. Brady Gaster talked about Squad, which is sort of like a multi-agent capability that's actually not even a Microsoft official product at this point, but it was, a Skunkworks project that he created that has gained a lot of adoption over the last, I would say, 6 months. And then Louis Quintanilla did a session on the building blocks for AI, so Microsoft extensions for AI and all of the related sort of building blocks that everything is built on top of when you're building Microsoft solutions using AI. So some really great sessions. Beyond these speakers, I really, really enjoyed Rocky Lotka's section. He kind of covered like every aspect of what it means to like kind of build an agentic um, tool because he built something called Rockbot, which is kind of like a native .NET version of like Claudebot or whatever the newest name is. But yeah, he had to dig deep into all the different areas of building an actual agent, and he just described it really well in his session. So some really good stuff, which will be published shortly. Our next meeting is August 5th, as per our standard schedule at 12 p.m. And with that, I guess we can open it up for any discussions. I'm going to stop sharing. All right. Any questions?
One about Trailblazer. Why is the turnaround to get it out onto the net or into YouTube taking so long? Because there's a lot of people who want to see it who've missed it, and
Yeah.
they keep pinging me.
So it's like 10 hours of continuous video that needs to be broken down into individual 1 hour chunks. And if there was any editing issues, like as part of like usually they put it, our marketing team puts a cover slide on. Um, and if there are any other editing issues, like in some cases the speakers started early, in some cases they started late. So yeah, basically post-production, typical video post-production. That's what's
Okay.
taking a while. Yeah. They won't all be released. Like we're not going to wait to release them all at once. They'll be released as they are completed. So I think maybe the first one is Michael Washington's knowledge graph and RAG presentation. I think that's the one that's going to be published first, but um, yeah, they will come soon. Any other questions? So I think that, go
Is
ahead.
there any timeline on the marketplace? Um, finger in the air or
So
general?
yeah, I mean, my
I see there's a
plan
lot
or
of
my,
work. I do see that.
Yeah, so my goal is that, like, since I've kind of been focusing on this, I would like to get it rolled out within the next couple of weeks.
Oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, like I mean the code changes to accomplish all of the main enhancements are done. I'm just at the point now of figuring out the upgrade path for like how to deal with the older installations, right? And how to accommodate that in the new flow. That's kind of the point where I'm at, but um, basically all of the other changes are done. So
Oh, that sounds really good then. That sounds really good. I was expecting 6 or 7 months or something. But,
no, 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 no.
okay.
It'll definitely be this month.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's cool.